All right, guys, here is your Industrial Revolution bedtime story here. Sixth period, you're going to be a little bit ahead. We'll get you caught up tomorrow. New forms of government begin to grow in the Industrial Revolution. The most dynamic class is going to be the middle class, known as the bourgeoisie. Now, they're going to be successful, but they're not going to be incredibly wealthy. And what they wanted was to get an education for themselves and for their children, so their children have better access to jobs. And they want access to governmental decision-making. They've been blocked for years by the old landowning aristocracy, and now these new local oligarchs. And one of the largest criticisms of the middle class during the Industrial Revolution was very similar to the French Revolution, was that once the bourgeoisie or the middle class began to acquire power, they tried to quickly hold down the lower classes. Yes, we've made it, but now, we don't want you up here. They saw the lower classes as a drain on the resources that they themselves have worked so hard for so long to get. And this is what is ironic about the whole situation, is that considering while they did not being suppressed for years by the upper classes, they turned around and do the same thing to the people beneath them. And it is the artisans who are going to suffer the most during industrialization. Skilled artisans, laborers, carpenters, blacksmiths, printers had maintained their guild practices. Remember back in the Middle Ages when we had 4 blacksmiths in town and the quality and the price of the item was all the same? That assured that all 4 blacksmiths had a job. Right? They were able to guarantee skilled laborers worked inside their city could get a specific price for the specific quality of an item. They passed their trade on to their children or to other apprentices. They looked after each other. If one was sick or hurt, they would all pitch in to take care of that guild member's family. And it worked for hundreds of years. Well, the Industrial Revolution is going to change that. An artisan's economic position was threatened. Industrialization makes it possible to produce the same product, but now you can do it quicker, much faster, and much cheaper. Guilds are replaced by factories. Skilled labor is no longer needed anymore. And this is going to change family structures of the Industrial Revolution. And what this is eventually known as is Proletarianization. And Proletarianization is a big word, is where the worker, the manufacturer, loses control of the price and the quality of an item. Right? A handmade, tailor-made good may be expensive, but it's well made. It's not going to wear out. Well, now due to factory work, the factors of production, the tools, the capital you need to make that item are taken away from the hands of specialists and turned over to factory work, where you are set up to maximize the operation of the machine. The product is cheap and you can turn out a bunch of them. It doesn't matter how good they are. They're so cheap. If one breaks, you can just go get another one. You lose control of the factors of production. And this is going to change, this is going to cause a problem for the family structures. All right, we'll get back into proletarianization in class. Family structures are changed by the Industrial Revolution because typically throughout world history, families had always worked together. The mom and dad would teach their children the skills they needed, whether it was to farm, to be a blacksmith, to be a miller, to be a baker. Their home life and their economic life was tied together. They were intertwined. But when the Industrial Revolution comes along, fathers began to work in factories. They were away from the home. They were separated from the home for many hours a day. By the mid-1830s, most textile, most cloth manufacturing was being run by machinery. These machines required laborers to have little or no skill. Remind me, and I'll tell you a story about GKN Automotive tomorrow. You didn't need to have a skill. All you had to do was to be able to work. So even little kids were shoved into the factories. Fathers were gone working at the factory 12, maybe 14 hours a day, depending on commuting time. Children were no longer receiving an education or discipline at home. Mothers began to work and had to do the work of both parents, the husband and the wife, to tend the home. The dads were gone 6, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. Children were actually sent to work in many of these factories. And the plight of child labor has been well documented. It was on the minds of many, many, many people. However, since children were no longer being taught by their parents, so education and discipline was transferred to the workplace. The old school home values were no longer taught at home by mom and dad. They were dependent upon other people to do them. Protests began to break out, and in 1835, England passed the English Factory Act. And the English Factory Act mandated that children could not work more than 8 hours in one day. An 8 hour, you guys complain about being in school here from 8:45 until 3:55. Well, after you worked your 8 hour day, you then had to go to 2 hours of mandatory education paid for by the factory. So kids were working a 10-hour day. Now, got to be fair, not all children had to work full-time in factories. With fathers making more money as a factory worker, many children did not have to go to work at a very young age. And in some cases, lower middle class, and upwards, those kids were able to go to school. Women also experienced positives during the Industrial Revolution. In some cases, families could live on the wages of the factory worker father, only one income. So this allowed for stereotypical gender roles to develop as mothers became linked with being a housewife. For middle class and upper class women, their job was to set the tone of the household, to create the family welcoming home environment. When the husband and the kids come home from school or work, in the old school it was like Kool-Aid and chocolate chip cookies. You had a little snack. Nowadays that's like drinking liquid cancer and rotting your teeth. So nowadays you have Fiji filtered water and, sea salted kale chips or whatever. Point is, when you come home from work, you get a few minute break, you have a snack, mom is there, hey, how was the day? You take a little break, things are clean, happy, laundry's done. Dad comes home from work and the family eats a meal together. Mom took care of the household. Moms also gained some independence. As well, the husband is gone, the mom was in charge of the finances, the bank accounts, paying the bills, which, believe it or not, gave the women some power that they never experienced before in world history. I'm going to stop there and talk about younger women. Your job is asking me about younger women, Charlie Bucket example from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and what my big word, so you guys can't write it down, proletarianization. What is proletarianization and how does it affect artisans? So it's a quick bedtime story, but if we can crush this and get to Adam Smith and Karl Marx, we can finish this this week. So, all right, guys, another bedtime story tomorrow, depending on how far we get.